Welcome everybody. My name's Lucia and I head up the UK research team. I'm very pleased to share with you today the results from our latest consumer barometer, which is focused this wave on three core themes. First of all, looking at consumer confidence, then looking at behaviours over the holiday season, and thirdly, looking at brand purpose. The results that we'll share with you today is based on a survey that we fielded in each continent over 15 markets, adding up to over 13,000 interviews, and the study was fielded in early January. It's my pleasure to share with you the key findings today. So let's get started by looking at some key indicators. On a positive note, we see people are starting to feel more optimistic and satisfied with their lives. So life satisfaction is continuing to improve and is up 9 points compared to January last year. At the same time, optimism is also on the increase. However, there is a backdrop to that, and that there is still significant cautiousness remaining in consumers' minds. And you see spend and security are still a worry for a significant proportion of people. We see consumer confidence spend does remain low, and only a quarter of people are confident spending money. That's actually down since last wave. It was starting to pick up but has since gone down. We also see 4 in 10 people claiming to have less money now than before the pandemic, and they still have concerns around job security. If we have a little summary on what we're seeing about holiday spend and holiday behaviours, we're seeing that the pandemic really did impact consumer habits over the recent holiday season, with nearly half of people saying they were very concerned about coronavirus over the holiday period. 3 in 10 concerned about being able to afford it, and nearly 6 in 10 people still trying to save over the holiday season given the economic uncertainty, and a third of people saying that they saved more than they would have done in normal years before the pandemic started. So really we're seeing still some underlying cautiousness in consumer behaviour. The third key topic that we're going to look at will be around brand values and how consumers continue to shop sustainably and are having more of a conscious thought about what they're buying and where they're buying it from. So we see nearly 8 in 10 people saying that brands should be accountable to consumers. We see 6 in 10 saying that they will go out of their way to engage with brands that align with their values, and then 3/4 really strongly telling us that brands should care about the role and their contribution that they make to society. So we'll focus on those 3 areas. We'll go through them one by one and bring that to life a little bit more in the detail now. So let's dig a little deeper now into consumer confidence levels over the festive period. First of all, we mentioned earlier that global satisfaction has improved compared to this time last year. So we see 4 in 10 people saying that they are very satisfied with their lives in the past 2 weeks. Remember, this was fielded in early January. If you compare that to the scores that we saw in January 2021, the scores have changed. They have gone up 9 points in the 12-month period. We also see optimism generally being higher. People are feeling more optimistic about the future. About 4 in 10 are very optimistic about the future. That's very much driven by the Americas and is less the case in Europe, particularly where it's lower at about 3 in 10 compared to 6 in 10 in the Americas. And we saw earlier that consumers are still worried about their finances. We saw a quarter of people saying they are confident spending money in the coming months given the pandemic. And actually, if you look as far back as just September, that number was significantly higher at 29% in September. So we are seeing an increase again in consumer spend, remembering that this was conducted just after the holiday period. If we move on from there and look at how concerned people are about their own personal financial security, we see again a third of people are concerned about their financial security, and that's very much driven by Mexico in particular. And we do see globally that around 4 in 10 people have less money now than they did before the pandemic. So it's important to remember as a brand or as an organisation to understand the difficulties consumers might be facing in different markets financially, and how a brand and an organisation might need to cater for different needs and different levels of possible spend. We asked people if they were feeling secure in their employment, and we see that 1 in 5 people are worried about their employment overall. And we also see a large number of people not just worried about their employment, but being in reduced unemployment as well. So again, just an important backdrop in terms of consumer confidence at the moment. We also asked people about the top areas that they expected to spend more money this year. And at the very top of the list comes utility bills, where a third of people are expecting to spend more on their energy bills in the next year. They're also expecting to spend more money on healthcare, personal care and hygiene. There's a nice proportion of people hoping to spend more money on holidays, which is a positive. And also household cleaning comes up as an area where people expect to spend more. Again, in the backdrop of the pandemic, with a focus on health and hygiene, but then also on a much broader macro level, looking at the rising cost of energy. We've just seen that energy bills is an area where people are expecting to spend more money in the coming 12 months. And further to that, we're seeing just over half of people saying that the energy crisis and the rising cost of energy is impacting on their spending plans. So we can see that consumer spend is being stretched in different directions in terms of financial pressures and some rising costs as well. So an important kind of macro trend to be aware of when kind of planning activities for the coming 12 months. Now we're going to move on and look at the holiday season in particular and how consumers were impacted over the holiday season in terms of their spend and their behaviours. We see almost half of people were still very concerned about the coronavirus situation during the holiday season. And so with that level of concern, we then move on and then see that consumers generally did not feel confident travelling during the holiday season, and the impact that has then on kind of leisure activities and the travel sector. We see that people are generally saying they spent less time socialising with friends compared to a normal year. They spent less time in restaurants or going out for dinner, less time going out to entertainment venues such as cinemas and the theatre, as well as fewer people going away for the holidays and fewer people going to pubs, clubs and bars. So those behaviours overall, where people are doing less of them this year compared to a normal year, obviously has quite a big impact on the leisure sector, on people's spend, on how people are spending their free time and getting entertainment in different ways. We also saw this year that consumers were shopping for the festive season earlier than previously. We see a third of consumers saying they bought earlier this year compared to normal years because they were particularly worried about stock shortages. And we also saw 2 in 5 people saying they did their shopping for the holiday season earlier this year in October or in November. That also links nicely to how people are shopping, and unsurprising, I'm sure, is the big shift still to online shopping. So we're seeing a third of people doing more online shopping this year compared to normal, and as a consequence, in-store shopping is impacted, with a similar proportion saying they're spending less time shopping in store compared to normal. Earlier on people being concerned about stock availabilities, which had quite a lot of media coverage in the run-up to the festive season. We saw as a consequence of that, nearly 3 in 10 people said they stocked up on groceries and household items more because they were worried about products going out of stock and poor availability. Of course, for many people, the festive season comes with additional spend. And we saw 3 in 10 people very concerned about being able to afford the cost of the holiday season. We saw a similar number saying that they'd saved up more for this holiday season compared to normal. And we also saw almost half of people using credit to delay payment and spread the cost over time to pay for their spend over the holiday season. So again, just some changing behaviours in terms of how people are planning, how they're spending their money and spending their time, an impact on where they're shopping, the timings of their shopping and how they're paying for it. So quite a lot of impact on lots of kind of overarching areas of consumer behaviour over the holiday season. That translates directly to how people are spending on gifts, and we saw 1/3 of people say they were spending less on gifts this year because their personal finances had been impacted and because they were worried about their own personal financial situations. The flip side of that is there's still a proportion who were spending more, who wanted to make the holiday season more special because of the pandemic compared to previous years. Another interesting area that we looked at in terms of Christmas holiday spend was the impact of sustainability messaging as well. So if we look at that now, what we're seeing is how consumers over the holiday period actually shopped more consciously, sustainably, and thinking about the impact that their shopping had on the planet. We're obviously seeing lots of coverage in terms of sustainability and environmental messaging, and that translated directly into a change in consumer behaviours over the Christmas period. So we see that 3 in 10 said the climate crisis was impacting their choice of products and brands that they bought over the holiday season. It was also impacting where they shopped and also impacting their travel plans. So sustainability did remain a strong factor for a significant number of people. So consideration of environmental factors has very much translated into how people shopped for gifts over the holiday season, the impact of being more conscious of the environmental and the social impact of what people were buying. We saw 4 in 10 people saying they were more concerned about sustainability when buying gifts this holiday season, and they were also more concerned about social and ethical responsibilities when choosing the products that they were buying. So in summary, over the Christmas holiday period, we've seen a definite change in how people shop, where people shop, the things that are important to them, and obviously a strain on the financial impact for many. So that's the second topic we were going to look at today. We're going to move on now to the third and final topic for today's webinar, and that's really focused on brand values, ethics and social responsibility. So kind of continuing nicely on the theme that we just looked at in terms of Christmas gifts, but now looking more in an overarching way at how shopping sustainably and ethically continues to be an important theme for consumers at the moment. So let's take a closer look and start with this one, which is very much saying that 3/4 of consumers find it important that brands care about their role and their contribution to society. So we're seeing this as a continued trend that we've been monitoring over time, and it continues to remain important for shoppers. We see consumers really caring about holding brands to be accountable for the products that they sell and the way that they sell them, and that wanting to have brand values that are aligned with consumers is still very important for shoppers. So if you look at some of the figures on here, what we're seeing is 8 in 10 people saying brands should be accountable to consumers, and we're also seeing 6 in 10 consumers wanting to go out of their way to engage with brands that align with their values. So if you're a brand or an organisation, really having strong credentials in this area is really important. Credentials that are transparent and that are really credible in consumers' eyes, because this is clearly a focus and has been for some time, and will only, I think, continue to be a focus for people as they move forwards. If we move on from there, we ask consumers, how can brands better communicate with and inform consumers about their business practices? And we see, half of people want greater clarity, greater sincerity, and greater honesty. And this all lends itself to really being truthful about your brand values, being clear and consistent in terms of how you communicate them, and trying to align your values with your consumers and what's important to them. We've seen this in previous studies, that actually how you talk to consumers about what you're doing is really important, and getting that tone and that messaging right is critical in terms of communication. If we move on from there, we continue our focus on brand values. We see 7 in 10 consumers globally consider it important for brands to align with their own personal values around the environment and social responsibility. So it remains important for brands to have clear policies that benefit the environment, offer products and services that really support environmental and societal change, with a focus on driving kind of ethics and green values and sustainability, and really that brands should align with my personal values as a consumer on environmental and societal aspects. So really, as a brand trying to understand what this means for consumers, I think you've got kind of 3 challenges. One is really getting close to your customers to understand what is important to them on a global and on a local scale, and then understanding what they expect from your brand to be in line and support some of the ethical issues that are important to your consumers, and then of course communicating it in a really clear, empathetic and transparent way. Unsurprisingly, you'll see consumers saying that they want to make a difference to their community and to the world, and therefore brands which are in sync with this are going to be better supported and have more consideration with your existing and prospective shopper set. Actually, who do consumers want to drive the change towards a more sustainable and ethically responsible kind of environment? And I guess first top of the list is really governmental, local authorities and public agencies, where people have the most pressure. But then also for over half of people, they have high expectations of the brands and the manufacturers that they're buying into. They see themselves as playing an equally important role, but I guess that relationship goes hand in hand as a consumer of brands and a supporter of brands, that consumers are putting just as much emphasis on what they expect from the brands they buy as they are from themselves in terms of choosing the products that they engage with. Importantly, when we ask people about whether they think brands are doing enough right now to support environmental issues, nearly half of people say that brands are not doing enough. Contrast that with about 3 in 10 that feel like brands are actually doing a good job of supporting environmental issues. So overall, it's telling us that consumers expect more and want more. And the only areas where they see this being done better is probably in the charitable sector and the non-profit sector. If we then take a look at are institutions ambitious enough with their future targets around climate change, we see about a third of people saying yes, we think they are ambitious enough. Therefore, there's a higher expectation that brands, organisations need to do more to be more ambitious in their targets around climate change. And also importantly, is there any trust in brands to keep their promises around their commitments to climate change and emissions? And we see a similar proportion have trust, so again about a third, but really what that's telling us is that there's still a job to be done in having ambitious targets and in building trust and talking to people about how you're going to get there in a very clear and well-planned way. So if we move on from there and take a little look now at our last slide for today, which is actually about how people spend their money and how they invest and save their money. We've looked already quite a lot about people spending and how their spend is changing and how they want to spend their money with brands that align with their ethics. But this last slide for today is really telling us that it's not just about the things that people buy, it's how people save and how people invest. And it's very clear from the numbers on this slide that people want to invest in institutions that are aligned with their ethics, and that people do not want to invest their money or consciously invest their money in any organisations that may be detrimental to the environment or to sustainability. And it's an important one for everyone to kind of have in their minds, is actually, how is my money being invested? What does this mean? How can I give reassurance to my customers in terms of what we're doing with their money, how we're investing it, and is it being saved and looked after in an ethical way? So that really brings us to the end of today's presentation. Thank you very much for your time. As we've talked through the 3 key strands of consumer behaviour that are really impacting everyone now. So really a focus on the kind of macro trends and what we've seen in terms of consumer confidence, a close focus on how people's behaviours over the holiday period have been affected, and then also looking at the impact of sustainability still on how consumers are shopping and what they're expecting from brands. So thank you for your time. I hope you found that interesting. There's lots more information to be shared, so please do get in touch if you'd like to look closer at any of the content that we've shared today. And I'd like to open up the floor now to any questions before we wrap up. Thank you.